ever gotten lost in the mall and had to consult one of those "You Are Here" signs on a map? Well, if you're like me, things seem like they're looking a little lost and crazy in our culture right now. And maybe it's time to take a step back and look at the "You Are Here" signs that are staring at us right in the face, like the fact that college students are siding with Hamas terrorists. We discuss these flashing neon warning signs all around us today and what they mean for our future. Welcome to Speak Up Virginia, equipping you to speak up on the life, family, and freedom issues that matter most to you. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candi Cushman, with our president, Victoria Cobb. Well, welcome everybody. Glad to have you with us for Speak Up Virginia. You know, today we have a little bit more of a unique topic, but I think it's going to be an interesting and thought-provoking conversation that hopefully will equip you to share it with your friends and just get them thinking in a more profound way. What is all this chaos happening around us, and what does it mean? Because we're in all this chaos all the time, but sometimes we need to take a step back and think about what is the takeaway from all this? What does it tell us about where we've been and where we're going? So that's kind of the theme of today's. But I thought to help get our mind around it, we should talk about having "You Are Here" moments. If you're like me, you've probably been in a mall. Well, first of all, I'm really bad with directions. So I'm the one at the mall staring at the big kiosk and looking forever and staring at the big red "You Are Here" sign, making other people mad because I've been there for half an hour staring.
Okay, so what's funny about that is I have no directional sense. I get literally turned around. I get in an elevator like at a hotel and I don't know which way I'm coming out. I mean, all that stuff. But at a mall, I'm a mall pro. So that's the only place that I don't totally need a "You Are Here" sign, but where I've been using them a lot, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that can relate to this, parents going and with freshmen to gigantic college campuses and going to orientation events and having no idea where these buildings are. And thank heavens they give you the "You Are Here" and here's where you're going. And because, college campuses for the first time, if it's a big enough school, I mean, goodness gracious.
Yeah, and sometimes I think we have those "You Are Here" signs all around us, culturally speaking, historically speaking. Yeah. We're just missing them. We're sort of in the day-to-day chaos, social media feeds. Yes. So I kind of wanted to just take a step back today, take a breath, and look at some of the crazy stuff happening and talk about, just pick your brain, Victoria. What should this tell us?
Yeah. No, I think that's good. I think you can sort of go with the flow until you've wandered in the wrong direction and you don't even know where you are, right? Like you just, and in the culture, there's a current that can sweep us all, and we just sort of keep on going, and all of a sudden we're down a stream.
Right.
And so I do think eyes wide open. And honestly, it kind of reminds me of a book that I read that I thought was really impactful. That's called "How Do You Kill 11 Million People?" So the title, of course, gets your attention.
Sounds lovely for starting out today.
Right. A guy named Andy Andrews. And really, it's this idea of like looking back at history and going, how in the world did so many people go along with such horrific atrocities in World War II? And I feel like I'm seeing things in culture in America I never thought I'd see. So many people going along with things that I just didn't think I didn't think we'd go. And thankfully, that book, sort of the takeaway is about truth and never compromising on forcing out the truth. That you can't, when people start altering words and altering, and this is the universe we're in, where all of a sudden things that used to mean one thing mean another thing, and it's sort of like you have to be rigidly committed to the truth to not end up in a place that you didn't expect to go as an entire society or entire group of people.
So it's saying it's one compromise at a time.
Yes.
That you don't see when you're making the one little compromise where it's leading, but each little compromise can get you to the place where it's okay to murder.
Yes, it's a little thing, and it's a little alteration of the truth, and you kind of go along with it, and you're like, yeah, I know it's not kind of right, and you just sort of and it pushes you down. It's actually it's pretty similar to the theme of the whole. Live Not by Lies. You've probably read that one, Rod Dreher. The idea of we have to we have to know the truth, stick with the truth, because when you start being willing to sort of go along and recite things that other people are, and
Well, we always look at things like millions of Jewish people being sent, to the camps, being burned in ovens, and we think, how could an entire society? We think we're so far from that, and that's why it's important to remember how they got I'm sorry, I think they were people like us.
Yeah, I think so. And I think and we've had some, and I'll botch the quote because I'm not a quote girl. I don't memorize these things. But you remember, like we're only one generation away from losing our freedoms. I think Reagan was really into that concept and would repeat that. But I think people understand that as we're starting to see them slip, like, oh, it isn't as far off. Losing freedom isn't as far away as it would have once been seen.
Well, to your point about undercurrents, I heard John Stonestreet say something that I really liked, and I just want to repeat it because it was a great point about that we can have these huge waves where we know that's drastic, the power is around us, everything's changing, ground's shifting. I mean, I will just say one time I was in Hawaii, I was having my picture taken, holding onto a rug, and this huge, I don't know if it was a tidal wave, but it was a big, huge wave just swept me up. I mean,
are there pictures of what actually happened?
Well, no, because I freaked my friends out because I went out with the tide and they dropped their cameras.
Yeah, okay.
But I remember feeling completely helpless, feeling the ground changing under me.
Yeah.
You know that moment.
Yeah.
But what you're talking about, the undercurrent, you're playing in the ocean, all of a sudden you're miles down.
Well, your kids don't even realize. Like, if I watch my kids go out there and they're playing over here, and then I look down, I'm reading a book or whatever, and then they're way down the other side, and that's because they don't even know they've moved. They come out and they're trying to look for the parent, like that's back on the beach towel, and they're not aware they have to look way diagonal because they think they're going out where they came in.
So what we're saying is, let's not miss these mileposts that maybe we should be paying attention to. So the first one I want to throw out there for the first You Are Here moment is what has been happening on our college campuses. I mean, really also high school, but let's just focus on college campus. And I think this is a great time to talk about this because everybody's back at school, getting started up in that again, and there's been a lot of trepidation about whether we're going to see these horrible protests cropping up again at all these colleges. And so let's just review a few of these troubling scenes that we saw throughout the last year.
On campus as pro-Palestinian protesters storm a New York college. They head for the 7th floor library at the famed Cooper Union. Then they pound on the doors, threatening 11 Jewish students who have sought sanctuary, locking themselves inside. They can see protesters waving wooden sticks and anti-Semitic posters at the library window.
On Columbia's campus, Jewish students endured threats with calls to go back to Poland. Here, a demonstrator points at pro-Israel students while holding a sign that reads, Al-Qassam's next target.
Okay, just want to clarify that one sign that you saw. For those of you that are listening, there was a student holding a sign in front of a bunch of Jewish students singing their national anthem, and the sign pointed to them and said, "You're next." And it was referencing, in case you didn't recognize the term, the militant arm of Hamas, saying that they're next to be targeted. They're the next targets. That's what the sign said. And it's not just a few one-off students like that. There were crowds of students openly singing just, chants supporting Hamas terrorists. What should that tell us about where we are, Victoria?
I think we have to be very aware, and I think this issue brought out to light how far the universities have gone and how our young people have been swept into this Marxist philosophy. I mean, we have to really understand that this wasn't a few. I mean, I think if this had been one college or maybe one group of radicals, but unfortunately we saw this on a number of college campuses, and I think the depth of how many places this was happening and to the point, they weren't just pro-Palestine signs. They were pro-Hamas signs. They were anti-Jewish. They were anti-Semitic signs. I think we need to understand that this is running deep, and it's running in our young people. And these young people, we like to think, okay, it's just college campuses and this is just what they do and they'll grow out of it. But those people become, and we know this because we have, AOC and others in Congress that are kind of off the deep end on these issues. And so we have to find our young people that shine like light in the middle of that to become our leaders, because otherwise this is what's coming up.
So that kind of answers the how did we get here? Yeah. We didn't see this hidden indoctrination going on.
Not to this level. I don't think.
But that's how we got there, right? Is that what you're saying? This is how we got there.
Yes. I don't think we knew. I think we thought it's a few crazy college professors and there's a few. I don't think we understood that this could run as deep and as wide
for as many generations that get to this point. I mean, it's kind of probably incremental over.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. All these things.
Okay, so what does this mean for where we're going?
I think it spells a lot of concern over the battles we're going to have over. I mean, there's always contention over foreign policy, but I think on that front, we should expect to see even more contention over when and where America gets involved. There was much more consensus at one time around America is as the country with democracy and just the bright shining light, like that it was meant to help other places around the world from becoming victims of terror and that kind of thing. I think there's a lot less sympathy for that, and certainly if it's a country that happens to also share Western ideals. Right,
because a lot of those same students have a hatred for have been schooled.
All things institutional, Western culture, right. Christian, Judeo-Christian. I think, what we're seeing there isn't just about this particular war. It's a much deeper, I want to buck against all these things. And these things are what make, a lot of these traditions and institutions and things that they are fighting are what have been the strength of our nation, the traditional family, many other things like that.
Okay, so unless something changes and we start rising up other forms of education as an alternative, right now we would be on a path to losing what makes America strong and our foundations in the next generation.
Yes, and I think we have to worry about just the way these protests have been done also, that they are in many cases destructive and blocking people from actually getting their education and some of that, because we're also seeing in April there was a major poll that was done about people feeling that violence was an okay means to get to certain ends, and it was 1 in 5 Americans. That's a horrific number that feel that more than just speaking your voice is the way to get your way. That's not okay. And that is how they also justify, that they're on the side of terrorism.
Yeah, because we see them chasing the Jewish students into the library in one of those videos and banging sticks on glass walls.
Right.
So this is a You Are Here moment for the way the next generation is being taught to view humanity.
Yes.
What would you say about that?
Yeah, the idea that anyone can watch any amount of news coverage or footage of women and children being terrorized, being raped, being, that we have hostages, and not feel the depth of what's happening there in your soul, because these are other human lives, like that we don't feel that atrocity isn't enough for us to...
Because this worship of the agenda dehumanizes.
I think that's what it is. I really do think there is... ideology is now getting in front of human beings in a way that, loss of human life and rape and pillage of young women and children, like that used to
and also
move us.
A worldview devoid of God creating human, I guess is also, if you really peel back the layers. But let's talk about a few of the that we're not completely falling off a cliff just yet signs with this particular issue, because sounds like universities are putting a little bit of common sense regulations in for this year.
Yes, I am actually happy to see we're seeing a few universities say, okay, we're still we're still okay with free speech, but it has to be speech, not blocking things, not being harmful. So they're setting up policies. VCU is a great example here in our home area of Richmond, where they're saying you can't have tents, for example.
Right. Permanent encampments.
You're not permanently encamping. You can absolutely protest, in an appropriate way, but you can't have tents. You can't have certain. They're just setting up more safeguards, and I think that is a good sign that the ideology is not running everything at the top of universities, that common sense still exists at the Board of Visitor level.
Still have some common sense.
And honestly, I truly believe we have our governor to thank for good boards of visitors, because I think those have been shifting. We are just at the point, I just saw an article yesterday related to UVA, and UVA definitely now has a majority of Governor Youngkin's appointments. And I think there's some interesting things happening on that campus, and you're seeing a little bit of,
Well, they need some course correction.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big, there's a big debate. They've peeled back. They have an entity that's been doing their student tours for forever. They're like the student group, and they run all their student tours. Well, there's been a lot of controversy with them because they're super left wing, and all they do is talk about all the slavery that has to do, and they put Thomas Jefferson in the worst, most terrible, favorable, unfavorable light at UVA. And interestingly enough, all of a sudden, the Board of Visitors has said, we're not going to let you do student tours anymore. Now, they're saying they're not saying you're too woke. They're just saying, we're going to pull that back and put that back in the admissions office. But that's a really good thing happening, whether it's connected or not.
Yeah.
But coincidence.
Couple of other more comforting signs. There was some accountability still happening with the president of Colombia resigning just the other day.
That's encouraging.
Federal judge, again, just the other day, issued an injunction against UCLA saying big news flash here, you can't legally allow Jewish students because of their faith to be blocked from campus. But I want to read the words of the judge because it was encouraging. And this case is still going on, but at least the college can't just kind of have hear no evil, see no evil when students are being blocked from their own campus. But the judge says, in the year 2024, in the United States of America, in the state of California, in the city of Los Angeles, Jewish students were excluded from portions of the UCLA campus because they refused to denounce their faith. This fact is so unimaginable, and so abhorrent to our constitutional guarantee of religious freedom that it bears repeating. And then he repeats it again. Jewish students were excluded from portions of the UCLA campus because they refused to denounce their faith. So even this judge saw it. It's like we're living in some kind of bizarro world or returned.
Thank heavens, occasionally a really clear call for correct behavior, for right treatment of other human beings. I mean, it shouldn't have to come from a bench, but I'm glad that somebody's out there saying, this is wrong.
Yeah. All right. Well, talking about flashing neon sign, we're going to move to another one.
Yeah.
I wanted to throw at you this whole area of technology and human sexuality, and let me just throw out a few things we're seeing, because it seems like these ought to be you are here moments if we aren't thinking about this yet. So, we're at the point where we have this ability to end a human life with a pill, create babies in a petri dish, maybe even getting to the point of artificial wombs at this point. People giving kids invasive medicine, invasive medical surgeries to try to stamp out any outward physical evidence of their biological gender. What does this tell us about where we're at, what we think about human life? If it's something sacred, can it be manipulated? What are your thoughts?
I mean, truly, what we're seeing play out in front of us, variations, not exactly the same, were what we used to watch in science fiction. This idea that you could create a human being. I mean, it's really remarkable that we are where we are, that science is and technology are getting to places that we sort of only imagined, 30 years ago or 50 years ago. And what's scary is that because our morality hasn't been advancing, it's been decaying.
Yes.
When you have science going one direction
Yes.
and morality going the opposite direction, it's kind of the scariest scenario. And we're starting to see that unfold, where if we don't have true understanding of what is a human being and what makes them special, unique, and worthy of respect and dignity, if we don't have all that and all this science is moving forward, that's kind of the moment that we're in and headed for worse if we don't course correct.
That's really well said. So it's like, just like you can't have a republic without founding principles and a moral people, you can't have science without the ethics.
Yeah, and they have not gone together. They have gone. You'll see articles where some will say the technology has gotten in front of the ethics, as if ethics is still moving forward in a positive direction. I think that might be charitable. I think it's actually like science has moved forward and ethics and morality have moved backwards. So the gap, I think, is actually widening, which is really troubling. And so it puts, when you don't have that as your core, if you don't have a biblical worldview, if you don't understand life, and I actually heard someone talking about how the chief end of education actually used to be to understand what it is to be human. That actually used to be like a goal in schools, which is not something I've thought about, because I think that was mostly gone. I was in a Christian school, but I think it was largely gone by the time I went to school, but it's been eroding even worse. But that used to be like you came out of school understanding what it is to be human and what it means to be part of a society, a collective where you live together and you struggle over things together and you help each other. And apparently when we removed that, kids these days don't really, if you don't have biblical world, if you're not a church, if you're not centered, you're not getting that somewhere else, and you're not getting it in your education system, then you're challenged with all these technology issues. Yeah. How do you interpret them? How do you walk through? Well, can it be that a human being is made in a petri dish and they have everything it is to be human, but we can stamp out that life because of how it was? You gotta walk through that without the grounding or even the tools to make sense of those difficult ethical challenges. You're kind of like standing there trying to put something together with no hammer, no wrench, and that's a hard place to be. And even for believers, even people who come at the world through a Christian, understanding and a faith, if you don't truly have biblical worldview, you don't really know not just stories about Scripture and that you love Jesus, but you actually know what are the principles that God has given us in Scripture to apply to this, you're going to struggle.
Right, which historically we saw scientists with that underpinning, whether it was Galileo or Pascal the mathematician, so
there's so much theology you actually can get when you study our earliest scientists. It's almost like just watching them grapple through the intricacies that they're discovering points them to God.
Or even Newton, right?
And even the scientists we disagree with, even, we go to Darwin.
Yeah.
Darwin knew what he was.
He knew what he was bucking.
Correct. He knew there was a theological component that has to be grappled with when you grapple with science and technology. He understood that. That's a challenge that puts us in a hard spot. And what it means, and this is, I'll just say this: what it means is there's a lot of people that have been, I would say, in conservative circles that you and I would run in, that have been on board with a lot of things that we would, from a biblical perspective, agree with. But now when it's getting harder, if you don't have that underpinning, we're finding that there's more sort of like divisions within, I don't want to say party politics, but I would say, within the Republican
social
camp.
Conservatives.
You're seeing Republicans, for example, jump on board with crazy views around, as if there's never an ethical issue around IVF, for example. I mean, that's just one, but literally, it's because if you don't understand this deeply ties to humanity, you can't work through those issues, and you're going to jump where the populace goes quickly. Mm-hmm. So that's where we are right now, and that's a hard one.
All right, now we were talking a few minutes ago about the invasive gender surgeries being pushed to children. And so, again, along the good news front with the You Are Here moment, we are seeing a lot of backlash. We've seen that in Europe.
Yep.
Now it's starting to come in the U.S. We talked about last week, major medical association with plastic surgeons declined to endorse.
Yes.
We've been seeing parents across the state, not to mention the nation, but, they're from the time with that whole thing with Loudoun County, when they were trying to push through the transgender policy, teachers willing to get fired to stand up for, I'm not going to just push deceptions to kids. Yeah. We're going to flash a few pictures up here on the screen of, in our state, the Protect Every Kid rallies. We see hundreds of parents turning out for that because they want to take a stand. No, I have a right to be involved in my child's life at school. You're not just going to push gender ideology without our permission and counsel my child toward gender transition without me being involved and cut out of the process. I would mention those two signs of both the pushback on the gender ideology in our medical community and also the parental rights wave coming out of that.
I think we knew when transgenderism kind of started to take root, we knew there are going to be victims of this. There are going to be people who go down a road not knowing where the road leads that are going to be harmed, and now that is coming to roost, and they are speaking out. And so it's a really important thing that parents are starting to see this and go, wait a second, this isn't about how somebody dresses or their pronouns. This is all the way to a really difficult path for kids. And so it's exciting to see this. But I would say this, these moments that we're in, when there is some backlash, it can still go either way. And our job is to amplify where there are these good things happening. When you see a news article or somebody coming out, parents standing up for their kids, or, and there's an opportunity to have a rally in your neighborhood, or you see a great statement by a Chloe Cole or a lawsuit. Mm-hmm. It's our job to take that little bit of momentum and grow it, because that's how we actually turn the thing around. We don't just have kind of a nice slight kickback and then we keep moving further left. We have to actually be the ones to turn it into an entire turnaround.
And that makes me think when we were at the Social Conservative Conference.
Yes.
And we listened to this whistleblower doctor and the nurse from the largest children's hospital in the nation.
Yes.
So the doctor spoke out, risked his job and maybe going to federal prison.
Well, yeah, they showed up at his doorstep.
Yeah. The nurse said that she saw him speaking out and decided to speak out.
The contagious thing is so important. Like, so many people are scared to be the first one. I'd say this. We're called to be the first one, even if we're the first one. But I'd say this, too. If there is one, go for it and be the second. Come alongside that person so they're not standing there alone. Come alongside that movement. And I do think we have this moment with parental rights, particularly on the gender transition stuff, where people are kind of going, oh, there is potential harm to kids, and we can really do something with that. And so, and we do have lawsuits. I mean, this is really encouraging. That doctor, the idea that they're blowing the whistle on a hospital who claimed it wasn't doing this, who was actually still doing this in violation of the law. So when those kind of things happen, our job is to get those stories out so that our friends and neighbors go, oh, there is something going on. I can't speak out against this.
I'm not going to stay silent.
Yes.
Well, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
We have been dealing with sexual experimentation being promoted in this society for a long time. So why is it that at this point people are speaking out? Because we could have spoken out in a larger way culturally at multiple points along the way.
Yeah. I think the nature of our society is very visual and very story-driven. People, that's what they respond to. And I think, unfortunately, it isn't people. It requires, I hate this, but I think there have to be victims of bad ideas, visual stories. And once you start seeing it, it puts the exclamation point. The principle might have been there a long time. Of course you don't want someone to harm your kids. Of course adults shouldn't be, encouraging kids. But I think until there is something visual and with names and faces.
Names
it's
of
hard
kids
to put a movement around it.
being sexually
Yes.
trafficked because they hid things from their parents.
Yes.
Chloe
Sage.
Cole. Yeah.
Yeah.
Chloe Cole talking about I was not told the whole truth before they
Yes.
destroyed my womanhood.
And a pervasiveness, right? If transgenderism was something you didn't really know about, didn't really understand, didn't really have a child affected by, it's easy to sit back.
To shut your eyes.
Once it comes in and it's the philosophy being taught to our kids and it is in every classroom, and then, of course, it's affecting your actual child and you go, oh, maybe I should have stood up for the children, but now I have mine and I don't want mine. So there's a little bit of we are very selfish.
I'm going to throw this out.
Yeah.
I also think we have reached the place in our society, if we're not having the Judeo-Christian underpinnings, if we're not having the fear of God in a healthy, redemptive way, that there isn't much that can compete anymore with it's about me and what I deserve. The self-autonomy is above everything. It's the highest virtue.
Yes.
The only thing we really have left is the protection of kids at this point.
Correct.
So maybe that's still resonating.
Correct. And even that is a challenge because we see that in the abortion debate. We see literally, do we still believe that a human life that inconveniences our human life?
But we've reached the point where it has to be visual kids protecting. Yeah, actual kids. But anyway, we could talk
go
a lot
on that
time.
one for a while.
But let me just kind of ask you a summarizing question here. So if we take all of these signs we've been talking about in their totality, and this is kind of a big question to throw at you at the end to wrap everything up, Victoria, but what would the main takeaways be for people? What would the encouragement be when they look at where we've been and what the future looks like and how they're going to navigate this world?
Okay, I know you don't want me to say this, but we need Jesus. Okay, but I think we know that.
I'm laughing because that's the answer my brother used to give.
I mean, it sounds Sunday school, but it is real. We need Jesus. We need more Jesus.
Say, would you learn in church today? And he'd say Jesus every time. But no,
exactly.
We need Jesus.
No, yeah, it's true. We need Jesus. But we also, I mean, and there's a little bit of a deeper piece to this, which is we need churches that are going deeper, churches that are teaching more. So even in our own, I mean, I do think cultural renewal, it happens through the mechanism that Jesus gave our culture, which is the church. I do really believe that he intended for us to understand his word, know how to apply it in a deep way, even when technology gets complicated and so I think that's real. I mean, it does sound Pollyannish, but I'm very, very serious about that.
I'm going to get critiqued for giving you a hard time about Jesus. So let's let you flesh that out a little. Because there is the Christian song, you know. Have you heard the one, I think we just need Jesus?
Yeah, sure.
Tell us what's behind that. Jesus being fundamental to our culture.
I just don't know how I mean, it is truly, if we are no longer teaching the humanity, the value of human beings in culture. There were things that you didn't have to know and love Jesus to embrace in the Judeo-Christian. That's how our founders weren't necessarily all themselves followers of Jesus Christ, but it was so pervasive, the principles that were in Scripture, that permeated, that in public schools they were being taught this idea that we're in a society and it's a give and take and we want to bless our neighbor. Like, if those principles are not just generically getting out there anymore, then it's going to have to be led by the people who still have those principles and understand that. I guess that's what I'm sort of saying is expecting these things. And this is true. I mean, the left doesn't, the aggressive left does not like Christianity, right? Because we have these deeply held beliefs. They think, but they forget that it was out of those beliefs we started the hospitals, we started adoption, all these things. Right. They think we can have all the good without actually having the underpinning principles. And we're actually seeing, no, because what it ends up turning into is everyone is about themselves. If you don't fundamentally have a faith and a God that is outside of this universe saying there's something more, there's something deeper, there's something bigger, then it's a selfish endeavor and you just go about life figuring out what's best for you.
I think Jesus is also the only thing that gives us a place of humility where instead of trying to overcome things through power and one-upmanship, we're coming at this. We have all struggled with these things. We've all lost who we are. We are all in equal need of a drastic salvation. Someone that was willing to sacrifice his life for us. And we can speak into that.
Yeah.
With humility instead of arrogance. And that is giving something that is nowhere else to be found in all of these things that claim to save people, whether it's DEI or whatever it is, right?
Yeah. No, and I actually had this conversation with somebody else yesterday, which is the fundamental difference between sort of where the left is headed and where the biblically minded conservatives are headed is that we believe human beings are flawed by nature.
Yes.
And they believe that we can somehow self-improve ourselves. And so to your point,
Which
the
turns into
humility and
tyranny.
the arrogance and that is why we head in two different directions.
All right. Well, I just want to end on a lighter note at this point. We need some levity in this conversation. So speaking of signs, I wanted to mention one that I thought would be a good candidate for our Inconceivable segment. Well, it's that time again. Time for our Inconceivable Moments Award. This is where we're featuring examples of the absolute lunacy and craziness that happens when cultural leaders try to give guidance completely apart from biblical principles. And we're calling this the Liberals' Most Inconceivable Moments Award.
Inconceivable!
All right, Victoria, check this out. Believe it or not, this is a real-life headline that came up the other day. And for those of you who can't see the YouTube screen, I'm just going to read this out loud. Summer COVID surge shows we may have to return to 2020 pandemic measures.
Oh gosh, they even actually reference back like it would be the same. That's
the same year.
Oh my gosh. Well, here's what I'm going to say about that. That's a horrifying thought.
Okay, let's just reprise a little bit. Remember when we were all
at home,
taking our groceries out in the garage, wearing gloves?
Where my neighbor's kids were in a tree in a mask by themselves? No.
People are driving with masks?
No. I can't go back to that. I can't. I have to say, in true form, and this is, just an honest confession, there may be reasons people still wear masks, but when I see somebody in a mask, I feel that panic of I'm not going back. Like
it's post-traumatic stress.
I didn't have a terrible COVID experience compared to many people, but oh my goodness, I don't want to go back.
On a serious note, these people that couldn't go to loved ones' funerals, we don't need to go back to that. Businesses and churches being threatened.
I'd like to believe people will be more willing to fight it next time. I don't know.
See, that was a You Are Here moment. But anyway, we won't get serious again. But I did want to read. This was originally published in The Hill. Apparently, it was an editorial. And the author concludes with this warning that we need to prepare for, quote, another new normal that might be a little closer to 2020 than how we've recently been living. So that is a little scary. And I don't think it's You Are Here sign. I think it's stop now and turn around sign.
Yes.
All right, well, I think that's probably an appropriate image to end on, a picture of us driving off a cliff. If things don't change, God doesn't have mercy on our nation and give us a bridge to go over, and hopefully we will have people speaking up so that, we can have God's mercy in all of this. I will just mention something that comes to mind, and that's just to encourage everyone as we're signing off here. In Esther, I've been hearing this a lot lately. Mordecai told her, you may not be the one, you may choose to be silent. God can raise someone else up, but that doesn't mean you're safe. So I think that, maybe that's not encouraging,
no,
but
I think that is
that's
encouraging.
What we're looking at here with the going off the cliff sign. So I'm going to end with our tagline. Remember, we are stronger when we speak up together. So if you want to help us get the word out, get people thinking at a deeper level, get some tools to process what's going on, do share this episode. Share the Speak Up Virginia playlist on YouTube. And if you're on audio or Apple, be sure to give us that 5-star review if you like what we hear, because it escalates to the different audiences. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.